Hello and welcome to Following On, whether you're watching us on the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube page or you're listening to us on the Following On feed. It's myself, Jon Norman, alongside me, Manthorp. We're less than 24 hours out from day one of the fourth Test match. Our commentary team consisting of Darren Gough, Alex Tudor, Steve Harmison, as well as Manners, Macca, Jared Kimber, and myself. I think have I forgotten anyone?
Don't think so. No,
okay,
7.
Cool. We're all looking at days off on Monday and Tuesday, aren't we, Manners?
Well, the pitch has been the talking point, and for those people who find it dull, I sympathise, because you don't want to be talking about the pitch, except that it is quite fundamental to the game, and if it's as cracked and as dry, particularly at one end, as everybody has said who's seen it, then we could be in for a helter-skelter ride. And do you know what? I don't mind that at all, John. I mean, this is India after all. We've had 3 wonderful pitches providing a fair contest between bat and ball. It's about time we had a dog of a pitch.
Fair enough. What's your favourite Batman villain?
I like all the villains.
Two-Face, right?
Yeah, okay.
So if you're looking at the pitch, so this pitch is Two-Face. So if you're looking at it this side, it's a little bit of carry, consistent bounce, good for the seamer. But then if you're looking at it this way, oh my God, the horror! I mean, it's plate shifting, tectonic or Teutonic. I mean, it's one of those games where you have to leap from one pot to another, and I mean, there'll be people falling down. Did you see that image of the 2 cars at the bottom of a sinkhole in Italy this week? Is that?
As long as the plates stay stable, then it's fine. You know what? The pitches in Rajkot and Visakhapatnam were also very platey, but they stayed still. They didn't move, and so we had no earthquakes. But on this occasion, it seems. But you're right. Everybody has said that it reminds me of when in the late 80s, when I was a young lad, at Trent Bridge, Nottinghamshire. Do you remember they were perennial champions? And they had Eddie Hemmings to bowl at one end and Clive Rice and Richard Hadley to bowl at the other. So the Trent Bridge classic pitch was green and seamer, very seamer friendly, and dry and brown. So Eddie Hemmings bowled from one end for most of the day, and you had Rice and Hadley cleaning up from the other. This sounds a bit like this pitch is that. But if you have the skill as a groundsman to do that, then good on you. I think it's a bit like ball tampering. You can scratch the ball, but you've still got to make it swing and hoop. But if the groundsman has tried to do this on purpose, and it's not just an unfortunate accident, he hasn't just had a bad week, then what would be India's strategy? Because they're going to play 3 spinners. They can't. Who's going to get the flat end? Axar Patel. Well, Ashwin and Jadeja bowl at the business end. And no Jasprit Bumrah. You see, that's what makes me think, John, that they might have rolled the dice here, India. 2-1 up, not playing Bumrah, who can break the game open on a flat pitch. So they don't have that option. So they play to their strengths, which are the spin bowlers. And without Mohammad Shami there, they with respect to Mukesh, he's no Jasprit. So I think that they probably have rolled the dice a little bit here, which is very exciting.
It is. And for all of you Baz ballers who weren't interested in Test cricket before 18 months ago, you flocked to the game and you thought, oh yeah, I'll check out that show. And you spent the last 5 minutes going, what on earth are they talking about? We're sorry, but the Baz ball will be back tomorrow. Pitch chat will always be part of this. It's a bit difficult for us to call the pitch. Cameron Ponsonby has sent us photos, but for more insight, possibly, shall we hear what Cameron and the Daily Telegraph fine cricket writer Will Macpherson had to say about that, and also, of course, the changes within this England setup.
Welcome to talkSPORT Cricket. We have news from the Ranchi Cricket Stadium. England have picked a team. It is Rehan Ahmed out, Mark Wood out, Shoaib Bashir in, and Ollie Robinson in. Almost forgot that one there. A surprise selection.
Yeah, a little bit. They've taken out the little boys and picked the big lads, basically. Bashir and Robinson, they obviously think this pitch is going to have some kind of uneven bounce. Their noises over the last 24 hours certainly suggest they think it's going to turn. Ben Stokes told us yesterday that he'd never seen anything like this pitch. Both he and Ollie Pope described it as interesting, which I think was a euphemism.
Yes.
It's a strange pitch in that it appears to be one half of it, if you looked at it from where the umpire stands, half of it is quite rough and the other half is quite smooth, to put it simply. So they're obviously expecting it to turn, and they think that uneven bounce is going to come into play as well. They've retained Jimmy Anderson, which is amazing.
Remarkable.
Really. I don't think many people saw that coming, to be honest. I think it was almost just an assumption that England got drubbed 5 days ago and Anderson had a huge workload. He also played the test before that, albeit with a break. He'll sit this one out and then he'll come back in Dharamshala. But no, he's playing here, and it's an absolute testament to the bloke that he is.
No, it caught me a bit on autopilot when I was interviewing Stokes for talkSPORT. He said, yes, 2 changes, Robertson in for Wood and Bashir in for Rehan Ahmed. And I was like, oh, wow, OK, that means Jimmy Anderson's going again. And it's part of me wonders whether the fact he's 41, rather than being a reason to not play him, it's like, we might as well keep playing him. He's 41, he's going to break down eventually. Just go once more with him again. Rehan Ahmed has been such an integral part of this team on this tour. It's kind of another nod to the McCullum and Stokes kind of cricket intuition pick, where they've gone, we've decided height is going to be the important factor here. So rather than having the wrist spin of Rehan Ahmed and the kind of variation that brings, they feel like this wicket, which is kind of split down the middle in terms of if you're bowling at the stumps and depending on which side of the wicket you're bowling, you're going to be using the rough, and they feel like the off spinner is going to be a better option for that. It does weaken England's batting lineup a little bit, and that's a surprise, given one of the considerations that we thought was possible was that Dan Lawrence might come in for Jimmy Anderson, and they were going to lengthen the batting lineup in kind of light of potentially a test match, which is going to be 3 days, 200 plays 200 plays 150. And Stokes actually kind of spoke about that, and he said, no, I think as soon as you go down that road, you're thinking about it too much, rather than it being a panicked selection from England where they go, we need Lawrence. They've gone, right, we're going to weaken our batting lineup, but we feel we've increased our bowling. Do you like the selection?
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think as it's sort of infamous that these England boys love golf, and I think that this is an example of them playing the ball as it lies. Okay. They're not getting carried away and thinking. I was a bit worried yesterday when they were talking about the pitch so much. I was a bit worried that they were going to spook themselves before they even got out there and think, oh wow, this pitch is going to turn loads. You know, a quick 240 might be enough to win us this game. Whereas actually, you don't know that. In the first test, I think they batted a bit like that. They batted like a quick 240, which is what they got, might win them the game. But the reality is, what they needed was a really, really big score, which they eventually got in the second innings. They need to just take it slow, and I think by not putting square pegs in round holes, because ultimately that's what Dan Lawrence at number 7 or number 8 would have been. So it's a calm selection. I think it's kind of like, right, we're going to pick our best bowlers and our best batters, and we're going to go from there. That's what they've done throughout the McCullum and Stokes era. You know, they haven't been afraid to play Stuart Broad or Ollie Robinson or someone like that at number 8. This time they've still got Tom Hartley at number 8, and he's been a brilliant batter this series. So, yeah, I don't mind it at all. I think they have put some genuine thought into it, and that is good.
And again, from my opinion, all roads were pointing to the rogue Dan Lawrence selection, because just before Stokes came out and announced the team, there was a group of 5 staff members all looking at the pitch. It was Stokes, McCullum, Patel had a little look, Collingwood was out there, the analyst was out there, and we haven't seen that at all across the series. It's normally been Stokes and McCullum come out, have a quick look, okay, this is what the team's going to be. They really, really have thought about this. And as we say, because half the pitch is, inverted commas, bad or interesting, the other half is fine. So if you're watching on YouTube, the far end, if you're bowling towards us, a right arm over to a right-handed batter, it's just going to be normal. It's going to be normal cricket. It's when that flip happens, and it might be an off-spinner bowling to a left-hander, when the kind of interesting stuff happens. Also for England, by going with 2 seamers, it lessens the temptation for Ben Stokes to bowl himself. That's got to be good news for the long-term health of him.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, it's only a few days since he made a pinky promise to
Still one of the worst sentences I've ever heard a grown man say, with microphones around him.
He's got children. He needs to use this sort of language. But it's not that long since he told us that, and then suddenly his workload has kind of spiked upwards. He did bowl a genuinely intense 35-minute spell yesterday. I reckon he got through 6 overs maybe. He hasn't put a figure on it overs wise, but he bowled plenty and he looked in good fettle. He was clearly thinking about bowling in matches, because he was thinking hard about the front foot. I remember Brisbane 2021 when he came back from his mental health break, and hadn't bowled in a match for a long time. Obviously, he had massive problems with his front foot, and he even got David Warner out with a no ball, which was a nightmare situation to find yourself in. So yeah, he's clearly thinking about it. I think it will depend on the game situation. I wouldn't be remotely surprised to see him bowl, but they obviously also haven't allowed his bowling to come into their thinking when selecting this side. I think if they had, they'd only have one seamer.
Well, Stokes said earlier on this tour that India is a 1 or 2 seamer location. He said it's never a 3 seamer location, which was quite an interesting quote in the context of 3 years ago England came out here and played 4 seamers on the most turning track of all time. Just a quick nod to India. They haven't told us an 11 yet, but it seems to be kind of like for like. We know what's going to happen. Mukesh Kumar is expected to come in for Jasprit Bumrah. I know England say the depth of India's cricket team is remarkable, and that is true. But Mukesh Kumar is not Jasprit Bumrah. Jasprit Bumrah is arguably the best seamer in the world. That's got to be an opportunity for them. And we're expecting, or at least the Indian press are expecting, that Patidar is going to keep his place, which means we won't see Devdutt Padikkal, which is a shame because he's just another kind of exciting young player to look at. England, it feels, I think the best thing about England winning in Hyderabad was it means we've got to this part in the tour. We're a month in, and this is a live test match. I think it's going to be very disappointing if in 3 or 4 days' time it could all come to an end. And Stokes was kind of saying that the competitive juices are flowing all the time, and it's not a case that they're looking at this match any differently. But at least maybe from a personal perspective, I'd be really sad if this is kind of over as a contest in the next 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, definitely. I think England have been really chipper this week, actually. That loss in Rajkot was brutal. 434 runs. I mean, it is quite literally almost as big as it gets.
It was
historically it was England's biggest ever win by runs. Many England teams, I think, would have been completely broken by that. But the England team I've been watching this week train and knock around the hotel, all those kind of things, has been pretty calm, pretty chilled out. They played their best cricket in the Ashes in this situation, 2-1 down. I don't think, obviously it didn't come to anything because it rained in Manchester, but
yes.
I still don't think this is a team that's out of it. I think they will. I think there's various members of that batting lineup who will be massively boosted by the fact that Jasprit Bumrah is in Ahmedabad, not in Ranchi. I think that will make a massive difference to them. Joe Root particularly, I still think that shot was born so much out of just an uncertainty of how to play Bumrah. I think England have got a real chance here. And how good would it be to go to Dharamshala, one of the most beautiful venues in the world, at 2-2? I mean, found out last night that no test series has been 2-2 with a game to play for 29 years. So it would
Brilliant.
but that's just a test series between anyone. So it would be amazing if that was the case. It would be a real. It would be great for this series, but it would also be just an amazing Test cricket moment if that happens. And I'm excited about that prospect.
Whatever happens here in Ranchi over the next 3, 4, probably not 5 days, it is going to be exciting. Every ball is going to be live on talkSPORT 2. Make sure to keep up to date with the talkSPORT YouTube cricket channel and the following on podcast. We will see you shortly.
So 2 changes for England, and there was a fair amount of surprise after everybody got really caught up in the notion that Ben Stokes was going to bowl 25 overs in the Test, that actually Jimmy Anderson is fit to go again. Now, if you listen to our commentary, Gareth Batty was calling that throughout the Test match, wasn't he? From afar.
Yeah, and he was in the minority because England had got themselves into a situation where they had led us to believe that Mark Wood definitely wouldn't play back-to-back Test matches, and neither would Jimmy Anderson because one's fragile and one's very old in cricket years, and so the assumption was that perhaps Gus Atkinson and Ollie Robinson would play, and they would replace Jimmy Anderson and Mark Wood, but Bats was right. Jimmy didn't. It wasn't like he was bowling 8 or 9 over spells. I mean, he was still bowling shortish spells, and I think that it's indicative of how important he remains to Stokes and to England's chances.
Yeah, I think he only bowled 10 overs in the second innings, but I suppose it would be a little bit of a leap to throw at Robinson, who hasn't played a Test match since July, and Atkinson, who's never played a Test match.
Test match? Robinson hasn't played a first-class game since July, has he?
Well, it's probably the same. Yeah, it's probably the same match, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's hear from the England skipper, though, Ben Stokes.
Have you decided on a team for the Test match?
Yeah, we have. Ollie Robinson comes in for Mark Wood and Shoaib Bashir in for Rehan Ahmed.
And why have you made those decisions?
Look, I think it was a heavy workload last week for Woody, and Woody's the type of player, the skills that he's got. You want to be having fresh, and he put in a pretty Goliath effort last week. Bowled a lot of overs, so good chance for him to have a break. But it's the attack in which we brought out with the seam. I think we are able to do that. Obviously Robbo's missed out on the first 3 games, but he gets his chance this week. And just looking at the wicket, I think the assets which Bash has, I think we'll be able to use a bit more than the leg spin of Ray. Obviously Bash bowls from an extremely tall height, and we think that this wicket might offer some spin, but also we think that Bash's bounce might come into play a bit more.
Kind of punters guess that it might have been Bashir in for Anderson. So is Jimmy pulled up fine and is ready to go for this Test match?
Yeah, he's good as gold. And
yesterday you described the pitch as something you'd never seen before. 24 hours on, is that still the case?
No, I mean, it does look a bit different. They've taken a bit more of the grass off. But yeah, still an interesting looking wicket, but we won't know what goes on until we play tomorrow. You've
picked 2 seamers again. Does that mean that you're less likely to bowl in this Test match? You said yesterday it was a case of how you felt today. How are you feeling today? Are you going to have a bowl?
I've pulled up very well, which is encouraging signs for me. But I think regardless of that, again, just looking at the wicket, that's how we always try and pick our team about what we think is going to give us the best chance. And I feel, although we feel like there is going to be assistance for the spinners, I feel like this wicket looks like it could be, both seam and spin can play their part. So that's why we've gone with the 2 seamers.
I know this team looks to try and put results second, or not get too high or too low. This is obviously a must-win scenario for England. You're a bunch of elite athletes. If you lost down the local power league at 5-a-side, you'd be annoyed. Does the kind of competitive juices get flowing a little bit more when the fixtures are like this and you have to win to stay in the series?
No, they're always there. I think that comment in terms of not coming on top of everything sort of gets taken the wrong way. Whereas we always want to win every time we walk out there. We don't want to lose, but we know the most important thing to us is sticking to our process and trying to play good cricket for however long the Test matches last. And we know if we can do that and sustain that for a long period of time throughout the Test, then we're going to give ourselves the best chance to get that result we want.
Rehan Ahmed's been a very key player across this tour. How did he take the news?
Good. I think the communication part about leaving players out, I think, is very key, and giving them an understanding as to why we think that. So then there's no sort of stone unturned. And the reason I gave you is one of the reasons I gave Ray, and he totally understood that. And I think the contribution that he's made throughout the series has been everything that we've asked of him. He's been our obviously the leg spinner to come on and try and change the game, and then I think the skill that he has down the bat, any other team is probably batting a lot higher than that. But I think this experience in itself is going to do wonders for him in the long term, and I think he's thrown everything that he's possibly got at the 3 games he's played at. So he can hold his head high, and obviously everyone's going to be disappointed to not play, but obviously sometimes selection can mean disappointment for some players.
With a potentially slightly shorter Test match being expected, kind of 200, 250 could be a good score. Was there any temptation to bring in the extra batter in Dan Lawrence?
No, I think if you start thinking like that, you're sort of you're thinking too much about it. We, as I say, we go with the 11 in which we think is going to give us the best chance. It's always great having someone like Dan Lawrence on the sideline waiting for their turn because of what he offers with the bat, the ball, landed in the field as well.
Ollie Robinson hasn't played a single game of cricket since July. You're fully confident in his fitness and that he's going to be good to go for potentially 3, 4, 5 days? Yeah,
definitely. The hard work that the guys put in, when they unfortunately miss out on long tours is for a reason, and the way in which he's operated, with the opportunities not coming, I think have been exemplary, and I think he's built himself up nicely for the chance that he's got this week.
Ben Stokes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Bashir in for Ahmed, and that is a surprise because I have been reading a lot of the preview stuff. There was even a chat that maybe Dan Lawrence might come into the side, of course. He can bowl a little bit of leg spin. But from what Stokes just said, that's a little bit too defensive for this England side.
On the front foot, take the game to India, and I get the impression that there are still quite a lot of people yet to be convinced about Ollie Robinson.
From what perspective?
Well,
fitness or
that as well, but also flat wickets. He very, very good on a green English wicket, and his record in England is
his record in Pakistan was pretty good last year.
Well,
they were pretty flat.
Yeah, they were, and the ball was reversing magnificently, wasn't it? And it hasn't done so in India. I think what's happened is the moment we started to see the SG ball reversing, it's only lasted sort of 8 or 10 overs, and then it stopped, and then it becomes very flat. And if Robinson can't get the ball to keep on reverse... Do you remember when Jadeja was scoring his 100? Do you remember he fielded the ball himself when he was batting 3 times with a sweaty glove and was picking it up, and England didn't object? The Australians would have gone mental if the batsman had gone anywhere near the ball, but 3 times he fielded it. So the idea, of course, you've got to keep one side of the ball very, very dry. And if you pick it up with a sweaty batting glove, then you immediately have precluded the chances of reverse swing carrying on. I thought that was really interesting.
Just as well Jadeja wasn't playing Zimbabwe under-19s. Do you know that Jadeja has now had 10 Player of the Match awards, 9 of which have been in India, and only 2 players in the history of Indian cricket have more Player of the Match awards than he.
Sachin?
And?
You got me there.
I'll give you a clue.
MS Dhoni?
No, not MS. He's kind of in the squad. Kind of.
Mohammad Shami?
No, kind of in the squad. I mean, he's kind of in...
Come on.
It's
You put me out of my misery.
Rahul Dravid.
Rahul Dravid. Oh, right, of course, yeah.
11 from Dravid, 14 from Tendulkar, 10 from Jadeja. I mean, he almost quietly, scored a century and a fifer in that Test match, and to be honest with you, it kind of passed me by.
And he wasn't even fit. He wasn't even fully fit. I see. I've had Jadeja in my World 11 in all 3 formats for the last 5 years. I think he's a fantastic cricketer. And I was looking through. There have only been 2 Test matches before at this ground, and you'll think, hang on, that was the same at Rajkot. It's exactly right. Just over 12 years ago, the BCCI redistributed Test match status to a whole bunch of grounds. You won't be surprised to hear there are more than 80 grounds with international capacity. And
That's
Rajkot...
same as Colombo, isn't it?
There's only 5 in Colombo. but it's interesting. So that was only the 3rd test in Rajkot. This is only the 3rd test in Ranchi. But what it does tell us is that it's black soil pitch, which back to pitches. Dear.
Well, we may as well bookend this show with we'll start with pitches and we will end with pitches.
Well, so the first Test match was very, very high scoring. Australia thought they'd done rather well, reaching 450. Steve Smith made 178. India replied with 600 for 9. And then it was Australia who were under pressure. But it was very, very flat. India batted 202 overs. Cheteshwar Pujari, you'll be surprised to hear, was in his element. Loved it. Batted for most of those 202 overs himself. And then 2 years later, South Africa got the dog pitch, which is what England are going to be playing on tomorrow. And India batted first, Rohit 200, 450, and South Africa made 130, and then slightly more than that, 150. It was the last test in the series. The ball was turning sideways, and they just wanted to go home, and they got to go home 2 days early.
Well, England will be going to Goa 2 days early, maybe. Manners, we'll be back tomorrow. What time are you going to be going to sleep tonight?
Shortly, actually. I think I was a late lunch and then head to bed.
Sounds good. See you there.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.